Welcome to today's episode of The Power of Reinvention. Here we talk with my guests about the dreams, the visions, and the passions that individuals have every day and dare to explore them. Whether it's business or personal, you're entitled to live the life that you want, and no matter what the circumstances, you have the power to create success, fulfill your dreams, and live with passion. That's what I'm talking about. So dare greatly and happy reinventing, folks. Hi, everybody, and welcome to another episode of The Power of Reinvention. I am so excited today to have a friend of mine who I've known for so long, Joe Lawson. Hi, Joe.
Hi, Kathy. Great to see you.
It's so good to see you and so fun to be having this conversation.
Absolutely. We've been talking about this for quite a while.
Right,
so
exactly. And we had a little aha moment on a call the other day, and I realized that it was high time that we got this on the record and had this chat. We've known each other for so long in our various industries that have always intertwined here and there. And this is a really, really fun way to, I bet, for me even, to get to know you better and to have you share some of the stories of your journey of what you've been doing. So thank you for your time.
Yeah, it's great.
I'm going to give a little background for those who don't know you. Joe is a seasoned licensing executive and creative leader with over 20 years shaping some of the world's most iconic brands, including Stranger Things. I think we've all heard a bit about that. Angry Birds, Shrek, and How to Train Your Dragon. He's currently head of brand licensing at Calm. I think we're all familiar with that incredible app, developing mission-aligned products for the world's leading wellness brand. Previously, he led publishing at Netflix and drove major content, consumer products, partnerships, and experiences for Angry Birds, DreamWorks Animation, and Fox. He also wrote and directed a feature film that premiered at South by Southwest and is an active member of the Television Academy and Film Independent. And I think it was when we touched on the filmmaking conversation the other day that made me go, wait, what? How did I not know this? And tell me more. And then I was like, wait, no, don't tell me. We're going to do this on a podcast because I feel like, right? Like these are the moments that not only do you get to discover about people or friends, but many of us don't really have a linear path in our lives. And sometimes we take for granted the unusual and interesting things we do along the way. And more importantly, what are those things that are those that really give us joy or are fulfilling, or we just do for the fun of it, but stay the course in what we're doing. So these are all the things we're going to touch on today. So I'm really excited.
Awesome. I'm excited too. I don't typically like to talk about myself, so it's a little bit embarrassing, but I'll do my best.
I will draw the best out of you,
Thank
Joe.
you.
Don't you worry. So I want to start with something kind of fun, which is, who was little Joe? Who was little Joey? Joey, 5-year-old Joey. What were your dreams, your goals? Did you have any idea where you'd be, what you'd be doing? I mean, I thought I wanted to be an elevator operator because we'd travel a lot as kids with my parents, and you'd be in one of those old hotels with like the iron gate and the guy standing there with the circular thing that he would twist to open it. And he typically had like a really cool little beanie cap on his head and uniform. I just don't know why, but I thought it was really cool.
That was
I wanted to
I
do
remember
that,
them in the department stores too.
Yes,
Second floor, ladies' shoes, lingerie. Yes.
Exactly.
That's amazing.
So who was little Joe?
Little Joey was, it's funny because I'm
Joey.
one of those rare people that knew very early on what I wanted to do.
Wow.
And it was clear since I was, probably 5, 6 years old, I wanted to be involved in movies. I loved movies. I loved TV. I was raised by TV. My mom wouldn't like to hear that because she raised me as well. But I just was, from a very early age, obsessed with the idea of telling stories in a medium that was visual. And so whether that was writing or acting or I didn't really know how it was done. I just knew I wanted to be a part of it. But I had no connections in the industry. All I knew is I had this love and this passion for it. And so I taught myself screenwriting, just got a few books and would practice at home writing scripts, and they were terrible. But even in my early teens, I was doing that. would make Super-8 films with my brothers.
I was just
Um
having this vision of you and Steven Spielberg with your Super 8 cameras when you said
Yes,
that. That's
yes,
so funny.
we had, these silent Super-8 cameras that, we'd go out and make these films and try to, slice them together. They weren't great, but they were something, and then video cameras, also kinda became much more portable, so we were using those.
The
In
beta
high school, I made
video
a
Betamax
yeah,
tapes.
yeah, a little camcorder,
Yeah.
got some classmates, together, and we made it was actually an episode of the show Moonlighting, if you remember the show Moonlighting
Yeah,
with Bruce Willis and Sybil
of
Shepherd, but we
course.
did a high school version of it, that I wrote and directed, and so we're like, "Oh, this was, a fun activity to do after school for kids," and so I had some kids from the drama department, and then just some friends who all kinda got behind it and helped us do it. There was nothing professional about it. It was literally someone holding a camera, nobody recording with good sound, and then we edited it on literally VCR to VCR to cut it together.
Perfect.
Scraped it together, but it was a really fun exercise. And again, I knew I wanted to do this. And then when it came to going to college, I would have loved to have gone to NYU or UCLA or USC, one of the real film schools, but I knew we weren't going to have the money to send me there. And
Right.
I was going to go to the University of Oregon regardless. That's where my brother was going to school,
Huh?
and I was fine with that. It actually kind of clicked for me. One of those aha moments that you like to talk about
Yeah.
happened when I was in high school, and they were filming a TV commercial in the park by my house, and it was pouring down rain, and they were shooting some people playing soccer on this field, and and it started to dawn on me that commercials are just 30-second movies, and there's nothing wrong with
And
that.
here we are in the
It's
era of micro dramas again, right?
100%, yeah, and short form content, and so just the idea of making content that can still tell a story in a very succinct amount of time was very appealing to me. So I'm like, well, University of Oregon may not be a film school, and yeah, they had a little bit of a film program, which was my major, but they were a great school for advertising. Wyden and Kennedy,
Yep.
both of them went to University of Oregon and graduated from there, and so they were sort of the legacy of what's possible. So advertising was a big deal there, and so I studied advertising, broadcast journalism. I took film classes, made a bunch of little short films while at college, wrote a few more scripts, and just decided that again, this was the world I wanted to be in. Since I didn't know anybody in the industry, I was going to put all my chips into advertising and make commercials, and that was going to be just fine. But then when I graduated, there was a big sort of move out of Hollywood to shoot on location, and a lot of films were coming through the Pacific Northwest where I was living up in Oregon. And so I started getting work as a production assistant on these feature films that were coming through, and it was giving me on-set experience. And I couldn't believe, that I was actually working on these big budget films,
And did
and getting to
you
be a part of
seek
it.
out these jobs? Like, how did you find these jobs? Were they showing up on, like, where were you reading about
Yeah, so
them? What
I had
were,
think through the newspaper or through I don't even remember how I would hear about them,
yeah,
but I knew that there was probably not a lot of people who knew much about filmmaking in the area, and so I took the initiative to sort of seek it out, put together,
interesting.
whatever kind of resume that I could. There
Yeah,
wasn't much on it, and managed to get interviews
good for you.
and,
So you were
booked a
very
few jobs.
proactive. Yeah, you were
Very
very
proactive on it,
proactive. Yeah,
100% proactive
right.
on it. And then one of those turned out to be a film called Free Willy, which a lot of people are very familiar with. And I was a production assistant on Free Willy. Spent a lot of time babysitting the main actor of the film. His mother was probably in her 30s, and she'd like to go out at night and have a good time. And so I would get stuck behind. And we'd have pillow fights, but the pillow fights weren't fair,
That's
because
so
he had to be
funny.
camera ready, and so there was no way that I could hit him in the face with
Oh,
a
right.
pillow and
You
leave
had
a
to let
mark,
him
and
win.
terrible, but I was free game, so he could attack me all he wanted. And so we were on location in Portland and in Astoria, and then when the film was wrapping, they were moving post-production to Los Angeles, and they asked me if I wanted to go, and I never had any
I was just,
belief
yeah.
that I would end up in LA,
Had
and
you,
be
but Did you want to? Had you
I wanted
thought
to.
about you that was a goal
Absolutely.
somewhere,
It was
front of mind,
absolutely
back
a
of
dream
mind?
to
Yeah.
be again, to
Okay.
work in the movies, to be
Yeah.
a part of the studio system, like, that was the dream
So that was
since
a
I
quick
was
yes
the
for you.
littlest kid. Yeah, so it was all I wanted to do.
Yeah.
And so the fact that I was then getting an opportunity to go down there, there was also at the time, a job opening at Warner Brothers. Warner was the studio behind the film, and a bunch of the crew, producers had recommended me for this role. It was an assistant role. It was like a, receptionist role for this role, for this. I forget what department it was, but it was something at Warner in production. And I came down and interviewed for it, and they ended up not choosing me. I also had been interviewing to be personal assistant for Tom Hanks, who was coming to Seattle to make Sleepless in Seattle.
Right.
And so I had met with the producers and director of Sleepless in Seattle, and they ended up not hiring me because they wanted a local hire, someone who really knew Seattle. And I knew it
Yeah.
just somewhat, but I was a Portland kid.
Yeah.
So I ended up not getting that role. So I ended up taking the job with Free Willy to go down to
Amazing.
LA to finish up and work in post production, which was an amazing experience to drive my car down to California and stay here.
I'm getting
Um,
goosebumps literally
yeah,
as you're saying
and
that because that moment for you must have been dreamy, like
it
really
was.
dreamy. Yeah.
And when I came down, it was right after the riots back in the early
Yep.
90s. And so I had no idea what to expect. I expected to come over a hill and just see a war zone.
Right.
And
And you're like, "Oh, what a look at all these palm trees and blue
exactly. It was lovely,
skies."
lovely,
Right.
lovely. It just so happened that when we were shooting for Free Willy, we were shooting miniatures in the Olympic pool near the Coliseum. So it was right in the middle of South Central. Everything was burned down, like the route, all the grocery stores were burnt down, and we were having problems with the film because the water in the pool was too chlorine and too clear. It didn't look enough like the ocean, and so they sent me on an errand to go try and find milk
Lord.
so that we could
Lord,
muddy up
and
the
you know what
waters.
they say, if you make a wrong turn in that neighborhood, it's a
You don't
wrong
know what you're
turn.
gonna get.
Right.
I went on my journey. Turns out every supermarket in the area was literally burnt down because it had just been. This was weeks
Sad.
after.
Yeah.
It had probably been 4 or 5 weeks after, and so I found a little mini mart. And he managed to have some, some milk. I bought 8 gallons. I took all the milk they had, 8 gallons of milk. And the guy behind the counter was looking at me very funny, and he said, "What is a white boy like you doing in this part of town
You took the
buying
words
8
out of my
gallons of
mouth.
milk?" And I tried to explain to him what I was doing, and he said, "You better get out of here fast before anybody sees you." And I took the milk, and we took off, and we made whatever. It is
Yeah.
what it is.
Yeah.
But yeah, so that was sort of my origins for coming to Los Angeles and again wanting to be part of the film industry. And I then did a bunch of odd jobs in and around LA, mostly temping. And I temped at every studio, just odd jobs. A lot of them were desk jobs. Some of them were manual labor. Some were filing. They were just all over the map. But it got me introduced to pretty much all the different studios and meeting people at all of them. I had a
Yeah.
long stint at
Good for you.
HBO for a while, New Line Cinema. There was a bunch of them that I did, and
Amazing.
one of them placed me at Fox, at 20th Century Fox in the consumer products division.
Huh?
And I did a couple of days there, and then I did something completely crazy because at the time, again, still wanting to make films, and I'd been writing scripts and was taking meetings because I'd written some scripts that folks were very interested in, and were surprised to see that this 22-year-old kid had written the scripts. And I'm not really sure what that says about me, but
Yeah.
they seem to think that there was a chance for me to turn some of these into films. Um,
Amazing.
and so I decided that at that era, it was the time when independent film was becoming affordable. People were still shooting on film, but it was cheap enough that you could get your friends together, put things on credit cards, and make your own films. And Kevin Smith was doing it with Clerks, and Ed Burns was out there,
Yeah.
Richard Linklater. And I'm like, I can do that. I feel like I could do that. And so around that same time, with the help of one of my best friends who had also moved down to LA from Oregon, we decided let's just do it. And so I wrote a script and wrote it the first draft in about 7 days.
What
And
was it
then
about?
The film is called Drinking Games, and it is the story of a group of friends that get together after the death of one of their friends who had committed suicide. And it was definitely very much in the Gen X era. And these were folks that, were told they would never do better than their parents. They were all
Yeah.
kind of stuck in a rut. There was no jobs. And so it's them dealing with the reality of becoming adults and dealing with a real world adult situation, and how do you process that. And the script was, to my mind, I thought I was writing a comedy. And there was a lot of jokes in it. It was, to me, it was meant to be very funny. We went and shot it. We shot it actually up in Portland for 18 days. I managed to get a crew. We had actors. We did a very unique process for our casting. Um, in pre-production, did a lot of work to kind of plan out what we were going up to do. And we shot it for a very, 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 very low budget. I think the whole thing all told was about $25,000. For making a film, that's nothing, especially knowing we were shooting on film. We shot on Super 16, which is 16 millimeter film, but with only one side, so you actually can get a wider picture. Because 16 is sort of a square shaped, and Super 16 was much more in the ratio of what 35 millimeter was, so it would look more like that. And so, yes, we went and shot the film. And while we were editing it, my editor, who was a professional editor, I obviously was not a professional in anything, told me that, as much as there were a lot of jokes in the movie, he said, you wrote a drama. And I'm like, what do you mean I wrote a drama? No, this is a comedy. And again, I'm 24 years old. I know very little about anything. And he's like, no, this is a drama. And he started to explain to me why it was dramatic and why it was a drama. And he was 100% right. And I'm like, I never really thought of it that way. So it was ultimately a dramedy. It was a drama. The story itself was a drama, 100% a drama,
But you brought
but
humor to
with
it.
humor to it. And so when we finished the film, we didn't have enough money to go back to actually get a print of the film, and so we were submitting to film festivals, and a lot of them wouldn't take us. They loved the film, but if we didn't have a print, we weren't going to get in. And the only festival that would give you the green light for someone to actually come in and fund the getting of a print was if you got into Sundance. And so that was the holy grail at the time. I think it still is for independent film. And so, we applied to Sundance, and we didn't make the cut to Sundance, but they put us on a list of 10 films they couldn't program that other film festivals picked up. And
Wow.
one of those festivals was South by Southwest. And South by Southwest was, it's funny to say this now because this is 30 years ago. This was a long time
I
ago.
was just gonna ask you, like,
Yeah,
what the
this is a
timeline was.
long,
Okay.
long time ago. And, so we, were talking to South by, and they were experimenting with something called video projection. It was something that had not been done yet, and they wanted to experiment with it. There was, a lot of the films had been shot locally on camcorders, and they just felt like they deserved an audience, and they, had no other way to really show it. And so they had these digital projectors that were coming, that were studio grade, and they were wanted to do that. And so we said, okay, that's fine, we could do that since our film is still on tape, because that's what we cut on. We were cutting on these digital. They were beta tapes. But the problem was, because we never got to go back to the film, we never got to light properly. So they were called one light dailies that we were given, and the time codes for all the scenes were burnt into the middle of the picture. And so the only thing we could do was mask it by cutting and sort of letterboxing the picture. But to cut out the time code
I'm
meant
good, yeah.
cutting off the tops of a lot of people's heads.
Oh my
So when you
gosh.
look at the film, you see like, oh my God, who shot this movie?
Hey.
The
Oh,
framing is
how
terrible. Most
funny.
shots work. There's only a few where it's kind of like, those are some interesting choices. But it's because of the fact that we had to letterbox it even more, to cover the time code. But anyways, we managed to get tapes, and we went to South by, and they had to break the film into 2 tapes because each tape was only 60 minutes in length, and the movie was 93 minutes. And so we had one that was the full hour, and then someone had to actually have an intermission to swap
And
tapes.
change the right.
So anyways, it went really well. We got distribution on our film came out on video cassette, was in every Blockbuster. We did a DVD. The DVD got put out, and during this time, I had written a follow up and was going to make that. And I started working at Fox. They kept calling me back to do temp work for them in this department. And while we were there, I was prepping to go make a second movie. So I was not really committing at all to my day job. It was just a means to hopefully pay back some of my credit cards on the first film. But we had a budget of 1.5 to go make this next movie. We were in casting. We did a bunch of table reads. We were in pre-production, and then the money all dropped out, and so I was stuck at my job while we were trying to raise more money. And it got harder and harder to get people to give us money to make these things. And little by little, I started getting more assimilated into my job at Fox, which, as far as jobs go, was not terrible. It was working, in licensing for a little brand called The Simpsons.
Yeah,
And
kinda heard of them.
we were just, yeah, few people have heard of them. We were just
I
revamping
was
them.
just literally emailing with our friend Sherry Sugarman a moment ago, funnily enough.
That's
So,
amazing.
speaking of.
So we, at Fox, The Simpsons had taken off like just a rocket and had crashed. Like nobody wanted to do any licensing with it because it had just kind of burnt every possible category you can imagine. And so we were the team that was starting to rebrand The Simpsons for consumer products and set up the whole new strategy. I was doing mostly brand partnerships. And so we called them promotions at the time, but these were licensed partnerships with some of the biggest brands in the world. A lot of the campaigns people still remember, Butterfinger. We did a lot of stuff with Burger King over the years. I must have done 500 promotions with them around the world.
Amazing.
Along the way, the biggest highlight there, which appealed to me, was getting to make these animated commercials, working with
You were
the
doing all
writers
the
and the
integrated content
directors.
and yeah, yeah, that's
Yeah, we had a
amazing.
saying
Doing
which
the
was, "Let the Simpsons be the Simpsons, and your brand comes along for the ride." And that's what we did. We just would tell these little, sometimes 15 seconds, sometimes 30-second little Simpsons shorts, kind of like
nice.
like back in the early Tracy Ullman days
Yeah.
when Matt Groening would do these little interstitials. And so it went back to that, and they all had to be very physical. They had to sort of have a percussive sort of moment at all of them to kind of end with a humorous beat.
Yeah.
And that became, for me, my biggest passion was being able to do those.
I would
Um,
imagine. I mean, you were
and
getting to do what you originally said, that
absolutely,
storytelling, the commercial kind of storytelling, which is these mini dramas in a way, always, which
absolutely. Yeah. Um,
fascinating.
and then we got to do the other big highlight for me during that time was the Simpsons ride at Universal Studios, which is actually still there, which is amazing.
Yeah.
But I got to project manage that entire process of creating the when you go there and you see the Krusty Land and all the design that goes into that,
Huh?
the ride car, every little element, the Quickie Mart that's next door, all of that stuff, came for us to develop, and that was also another highlight. So I was at Fox for about 12 years,
Right. So you
and
did digital, you did media, you did integrated
I
marketing, you did
did, yeah, I did
experiential. I mean, you
all
touched all of it. The
everything,
merch, the
and got to
licensing.
work with some of the biggest brands in the world
Yeah.
on a bunch of different. You can actually see some of my artwork here,
Yeah, I
for those who
do.
are
I do.
watching. That's Intel. This one is Mastercard.
Oh
I've
my
got a few
gosh.
others,
I
that
love
are
it.
that are here, but, yeah, so a lot of great experience there, and when I left, Fox, I did so because I was working, and this is actually, I think, when you and I met, because I was, working with, Mitch Junkins, and CDM,
Yeah.
because they had secured Subway as a partner, and we had just done a uh, campaign for Subway and Family Guy. And they told Mitch that if he could somehow steal me away from Fox, that they would give him the Subway Kids business, and the entertainment business. And so we negotiated, and I went to work for Mitch, and we spent some time with the team at Subway doing entertainment marketing, and it was great. But they learned everything they needed to know. We introduced them to all the studios. and they
Right.
didn't need us. So that
Right.
lasted maybe a little over a year. And from there, for me, at every single stage, every time between jobs, and I'm sure, when we talk about reinvention, you do have to reinvent yourself every time you go for a new job because they're never going to be exactly the same. At least for me, that's never been the case. And partly that's because I think when I do have a job, I wear a lot of different hats. So, not only am I doing business deals, but I'm also in charge of creative. I'm also in charge of, production. And
But
so
is
there's
that
all
the
these different
mandate
facets.
always, or is it because it's by choice? Do you kind of raise your hand and go, "Hey, I know a little bit about that. I've got a thought about that." I mean, not everybody,
Yes. Yeah.
has that
It's a little
ability,
bit of
but
both.
I think it's probably right. Yeah, that's
Yeah,
what I
a little
thought.
bit of both. I think it starts with the hand raising of saying,
Yeah,
"Hey, I'd love to try my hand
yeah.
at," but then they also start to notice, like when I first started at Fox, I was an assistant, just answering phones and doing things, and my boss at the time, who's Susan Spencer, who's now at the
Mhm.
TV Academy,
Yeah.
she told me I was a terrible assistant because I was bad at relaying messages and whatever. But whenever I give you a project, you do just fine with it.
There you go.
And so it was about showing initiative and where your passions were at. And that's kind of what helped me sort of break out of just, being stuck as one thing. And yeah, I think that that's
But
a
you know
great
what
lesson
also I
throughout.
heard that you've shared, and I kind of noted it a few times along the way so far, is that you've talked about the jobs you didn't get. Your dream, your heart was set on something, it didn't happen. This didn't happen. You didn't get the money for the films and the funding. And just to go back for one moment, those moments can be really life defining. They can be
Absolutely.
moments that like knock you over and go, oh, what am I thinking? I shouldn't be in this business. Who was I kidding? I'm going to go do something else like this. And I love the fact that you just, now you tell the story, but I'm sure at the time it didn't feel that easy. How did you overcome those moments? What did you have to say to yourself? Or who did you count on? Who did you lean on? Who were your
Yeah.
mentors? What did you do to kind of get through those moments when the whole world wasn't quite going your way? And you've just shared like 3 or 4 anecdotes where that was in fact the case. That's part of your story
Absolutely.
today.
And there's a lot more later in my life where the same similar situation, and I think a lot of that stems from my upbringing. I was raised by a single mom, three boys, single mom, and she was always all about, pick yourself up by your bootstraps and keep moving forward. There's no time to wallow in the sorrows of things that didn't happen. There was also sort of this manifestation. If you dream in something, believe in something, you'll make it happen. And if it didn't happen now, it could happen later. As long as you continue to visualize and believe that you can do something, anything is possible. And for me, I've just always been a very curious person. And so I never really get stuck on one thing. I've never been one to just rest on, oh my God, that was an amazing thing I did. And I just want to stay here. It's always like on to the next. What's the next thing? What's the
Well,
next project?
you've taken the gems, and I can hear it in what you're telling and the way you tell the story. Everywhere you went, you picked up something that you added to your tool chest that became part of who you are, that brought more to the conversation, that enabled you to raise your hand or be curious and say, I want to learn more. I want to do this, or I think a little bit about that. It sounds like that really was part of your DNA.
Absolutely, part of the DNA, and definitely part of again, and part of my just being raised that way to sort of visualize things, and also just to realize that setbacks are minor. These things they may feel tough, and it may feel like the end of the world, but they're not. Things go on. One door closes, another one opens up,
Yes.
and that definitely seems to be the case. And I think I've been living proof of that. Where when you make a transition from one job to another, or one career to another, from completely different areas of work. And for me, what's always been sort of the driving factor is finding things that I'm passionate about, things that I like to. Like, I couldn't go work for something that I wasn't excited about what they do or what their messaging are, what they're doing. And for me to still be tangentially, tied to making films, like, even when I was working for Subway, and
Okay.
we did a lot of movie promotions, I was working with the filmmaking crew of these films that we were tying into. And so it was still back to
Yeah.
the creative
You got
side
to the
and
blend
getting.
the storytelling to your point. You've said that several times. And I think that's so much the zeitgeist of the industry, no matter what side you come in at it. I want to ask you a question about Netflix because you
Yes.
spent time there
Yes.
and you kind of help build out or develop, if I remember correctly, sort of this part of Netflix that was a little different around publishing.
Yes.
How did that come to be?
Great. Well, let's jump ahead. I think it's a great place
Sorry,
to
no,
jump ahead to.
and I don't
No,
want
it's
to
great.
skip
It's a
anything, but
this is great because I was coming off of work at Rovio, where I had started off
yeah,
just
sorry, I forgot
in
Angry Birds along
yeah,
the
the
way there.
Angry it's a perfect segue actually to this stuff. So for Angry Birds, I went there just doing consumer products and licensing on the international side. But part of my desire to go there was that I knew they were making a film, and I figured there was nobody in Finland where the company was based who'd worked on a big budget animated film. And I was coming from DreamWorks Animation, where that's all that we did. And so I figured that there was a really great opportunity for me to lead the partnerships, lead the marketing of the film. And I kept telling people things that they weren't doing related to the film. And at the time, they were running the show. They were paying for it. Sony was on board as a distribution and marketing partner, but Rovio was really in charge of it. And so I kept telling people, you should be doing this, you should be doing this, and nobody would listen. And so little by little, I ended up talking to the right ear, and someone became the new CEO and immediately put me in charge of the movie program. And I thought it was just going to be partnerships and marketing, but it turns out it was the entire program, which meant production, marketing, distribution, everything. And so I became the main person on the Rovio team, working with the
Amazing.
filmmakers and the studio to bring the film to market.
Wow, that's
And that
exciting.
sort of, again, put me back in touch with my main passion of being
Yeah,
involved in the creative process. Following that, the first film, I ended up working on the second film. We developed TV series for Angry Birds. We were doing a bunch of stuff in the story space. And I'm like, this is the passion. This is where I want to go. But it turned out that the folks at Rovio, again based in Finland, wanted to bring things back into Finland. They didn't really want an American from outside there, guiding all the content
yeah,
for them.
yeah.
And so, which was fine. At the time, I was going to leave and actually work on the Angry Birds TV series, which then the pandemic hit and things got messed up. And regardless, I was sort of looking for my next role,
Yeah.
and I had been talking to Netflix about a potential role there for franchise marketing and licensing. And at the time, they were just starting. They had a couple of properties, Stranger Things being one of them. They were starting to develop these properties that could last for multiple seasons. And rather just working on just what's the latest property, let's start to look at a franchise mentality. But we couldn't get to the right formulation of what that role could be. And at the same time, they were looking for someone to handle publishing. And I put them in touch with a few people that I thought might be good for the role. And they interviewed
So,
them and went through the process. And they came back to me and said, would you consider the publishing role? And I'm like, I've never done publishing before. I'll
right.
come right out and tell you, not something I've done. And they said, well, you've done licensing before. And I said, yeah, I'm very,
Yeah.
familiar with licensing.
You
Um,
understand how to put deals together
you know how to
and
put deals together, and
creatively.
story, like how
Yeah.
to put a
Yeah.
story
Yeah.
together. And this is basically telling original stories for our properties in book form and doing deals with the publishers. And I'm like, yeah, that really is kind of a nice marriage of the kinds of things that
Yeah.
I've been doing and enjoy doing. And so I did interview for it, and part of their thinking at the time, I don't know if it's still the case, was finding people who may not be the obvious choice for a role, but someone who tangentially
Sometimes.
may take it a different path. They
Yeah.
don't want
Well,
someone
that's
who
sometimes the most interesting. I mean, look, I run an agency and I represent clients across sports, entertainment, lifestyle, children, luxury, travel, B2B. And it's so fascinating when you bring ideas from one industry into a different industry and everybody thinks you're a genius. You're just applying the things that you know in places they don't usually exist. And that is the secret sauce. But I have to ask you a funny question because when you were talking about your movie and the distribution of it, you mentioned
yes.
Blockbuster. So my question to you is, did you ever talk to Ted Sarandos and ask him if he ever came across, because those who know Ted's story know that that's where he started.
Yes.
And
Yeah,
I
yeah,
knew
yeah.
Ted in the red envelope days of Netflix. And, so that whole, and we were old friends. curious to know. I was gonna interrupt and ask you that
Yeah,
before when
no,
you
and
said Blockbuster, but I
it never
forgot
came up.
the
I
full
never talked to
circle of
Ted
Netflix
about
then.
it,
Okay.
and I think it probably would have predated his time there
It may
because
have.
it was a very short-lived piece, and we're going way back
Okay.
into the, mid-90s, when my video cassette came out,
Right.
and my DVD. So, yeah,
Okay.
but it was
Anyway.
something that, and I just recently made a digital conversion of my film, that I wanna stream somewhere, but the quality is just terrible, so I'm trying to figure out how to find a higher quality because the film itself has
Interesting,
long
'cause
been
I have a business
destroyed.
idea for you, which we'll talk about
All right,
afterwards. I
perfect.
actually
Love it.
made a note about that
I
already,
love
so
all your business ideas. They're always great. But yeah, so when Netflix decided to hire me to do something
Uh-huh.
that I'd never done before, I had a lot of people going, what are they thinking? You know nothing about this. And again, that's about reinvention, and it's about being willing to take a shot at something that you
Exactly.
may not think that you're capable of doing, but it's within your interest zones. It's similar to things you've done before. And for me, that was about taking a leap into the unknown of saying, well, why can't I do this? Like, this is something
Right.
that
Good for
fits in
you.
well with what I'm doing. I love the company. I love what it stands for. It was right in the middle of the pandemic, and people were at home with nothing else to do but to watch Netflix. And I thought, this is great. We can tell some stories that, rather than people having to wait for the next season of something, we can, put out some books to keep the fandom going.
Yeah.
And I went in there with some big ideas of some things that we could do. Some of them panned out, some of them did not. And ultimately, when I first joined, the direction was really about fan joy. That was everything we were trying to do. And we were part of marketing. We were an extension of marketing. And so it was about bringing cool products to market and giving fans something cool that they could own. It wasn't really about revenue at that
Yeah.
time.
Right.
But that changed very quickly. About a
Right.
year into what we were doing, commerce and revenue became very important.
Yeah.
And in those that have been in publishing, no, publishing is not the highest revenue generating category. So what I was doing in publishing started to get much more deprioritized.
Sure.
And so I started working in other categories. I was doing some print on demand explorations. I was working on the Walmart program. There were other things I was doing in addition to publishing. And it ultimately became clear that it was not something that, required a full-time head to do. And so, yeah, so that's my Netflix story.
It's amazing. And I mean, what's really fabulous, and what I love, Joe, is that you keep referencing things that maybe didn't work out the way they planned, or you planned, or, what you wanted didn't quite happen. And I just love that you make it feel like it's okay, it's normal, and you carry on,
Yep.
right? And
Perfect.
I think at the end of the day, it's not always easy to do that, but you made a point earlier about, when you kind of have your true north, you sort of set your sights on something, you do pick yourself up by the bootstraps and you do carry on, or you find a way to pivot or detour. I talk a lot in my book about the reinvention roadmap. And if you literally think about a GPS system in our car, if you put in the destination, you're ultimately going to get there. There may be a detour, there may be a roadblock, there may be traffic, there may be, a change. It may take longer than you expected it originally. It may take less time, but you have a destination. How are you going to get to your destination if you don't identify it and at least start to put some of the pieces in place to get there? Baby steps,
Absolutely
big
agree.
leaps, all of that.
Absolutely agree. Yeah, and I feel like, reinvention at every step of the way, not just between jobs, but when you're at a job and there's a detour and where things go, you can either let it get to you and get you down and check out and just, become just dissatisfied with everything, or you can make the best of it and start to look for what else is out there. And, we live in a reality of ageism. There
Yeah.
is when you get to a certain point in your career and you start to have a resume that's 2 pages long, and they start to go back and see how long you've done certain things, you start to get aged out of certain roles. And for me, without having a specialty, that also becomes really tricky. When there's
Interesting.
one thing that you do and you're really good at it, it's not as difficult, I
You're
think,
right.
to get hired for something because people
Yeah.
know that you are the expert in that.
Right.
And if you're somebody who has diversified your entire career, sort of become a jack of all trades, master of none, or master of a few,
Many.
it's
Yeah.
really hard to pinpoint. And so I literally would have 4 or 5 different resumes that I would
Yep.
send out depending on the job, and that
Good for
focused and
you.
showed that I
Yeah.
could do certain things, and that was something that I learned on pretty early on, which
Yep.
was that, it's great to have these other skill sets
Right,
that
but it's
always
hard for
help
other
you.
people to put you in the buckets in their
Absolutely.
head, and therefore and I have this conversation often with people at different stages of their lives that sometimes someone says, "I could do anything, help me find a job." Well, you're not helping me help you because
Totally.
I know 14,000 people. Like, I didn't even know where to start, and that's not my full-time job to find you a job, but if you say, "I wanna go to these 3 companies, and this is what I wanna be doing," I'm gonna find you the right people to talk to, right? And I think, that is the dilemma there, but it feels like you understood the assignment for yourself at all
For
these
myself,
junctures,
yeah.
right? And you said, "Okay, this is how I have to manage it." And I love that. I love the lesson in this that people are getting to hear because many people are nodding their head listening to this going, "Me too, me too. Oh yeah, me too, and I'm dealing with that or I've dealt with that." Having a few different resumes or being really clear when you speak to a particular company or someone that's going to help you to give them the focal points to help get you where you need to go.
Absolutely. And I know the other piece of it too, when you start to get older and one of the great things that you have is a network of colleagues you've worked with. And I learned this very, very early on, which is never burn bridges, never treat people poorly, because you never know when you might need their help. And so, that was a really important thing for me very early on, because I maybe wasn't the nicest when I first started working, but it dawned on me that you never know where people's trajectories are, and there's a good possibility that someone that you're working with may end up at a place that you want to be, and you want to have that connection to help you get in there. But it's just a good lesson to also just treat people well, because it always comes back to you. The
Yeah.
way you treat people comes back to how you were treated and how you're respected. And so these are things that I think as we get older in business, things that keep us afloat is going to our network and saying, "Hey, look, I'm in between roles right now. Is there anything we
Yeah.
can be doing together?"
And
You know,
people love to help. I don't think everybody realizes
agreed.
the value of what when you ask someone to help you. And if you can at least, do it in a way that is giving them a little focus, people do love to be helpful. I think everybody likes to feel like they're doing good in the world, and there are a lot of ways to do that. So you're absolutely right. You've ended up at the moment, because your career is far from over, but you are in such a special place. You're at Calm.
Yes.
So tell us a bit about, how did that come to be and what is it that you're trying to do there? I know a little bit because of the conversations we've had, but it's such a beautiful and special place to be working. I've met the owners of the company, and so I'm curious to hear just kind of what your experience is in this part of your journey.
Yeah, it's great. So, it came about. I was working in location-based entertainment, which is another passion of mine, which started also as a kid and loving theme parks and getting the chance to work on the Simpsons ride. So when I was at Angry Birds, I was also in charge of location-based entertainment and hired George Wade, who, if people don't know him, he's the absolute best in the business,
Yep.
in location-based entertainment, and he helped me build a strategy for Angry Birds, that they're still applying today to help take the brand into experiences and rides and all the different ways that it can show up. And so I've been working with George. Again, just out of the kindness of his heart, he brought me in to help him with a few projects, and we sort of turned it into a bit of a little sort of minor consultancy thing where for him it's his full-time business, but for me it was like this is a great place to be because I love this field and I love the projects that we're working on. And so I was starting to make that my next thing. That was everything. And then Steven Extract came to me and said, "Hey, I'm working with the guys at Com and they're looking for someone to do licensing. Would you consider?" And I knew the Com app, but what I knew more than anything was the utility of the Com app. And I felt like in this world that we're living in today, we all need calm more than ever. And when I look at my career, if there's one thing that's consistent, it's finding things not only that I'm passionate about, but that touch people and are important to as many people, as humanly possible. Whether it was, The Simpsons when I was there, Angry Birds, the biggest mobile game to ever come out, and people were just learning how to use the touch screens on their phone, to Netflix in the pandemic. This to me just felt like the next most important thing that the world needs, is more calm. And so if I could find ways to help them take the equity that they built and bring it to life in new ways, that would, be very satisfying for me. But I feel like I could also impact a lot of people's lives and put smiles on a lot of faces. And so for me, it just felt like absolutely I want to give this a try. And very thankful that the team saw the potential,
Yeah.
and what we could do together. And I'm loving it there. I feel like, the brand itself and what we're able to do, is just, there's just
It
no,
stands for so
it
much.
stands for so
It
much, and there's
literally
so many people who
does.
want to play in the
Yeah.
wellness space right
Yeah.
now who can't authentically do it. And so we immediately bring credibility to any kind of partnership that we're talking about, because we have the credibility in the space, that it really can, the sky's the limit in what's possible and what we can do. And so, we do have, a betting program that's launching in Target, right after Christmas, which we're very excited about. Some pillows and some
Clever.
sheets are coming in 26. The number one use case for calm is sleep. And so we love to help people get a
Yeah.
better
I think
sleep.
my husband will be the first in line to buy those.
And we just came out with some sleep buds, with this company Oslo, and these things are amazing. They're wearables that you put in, that you can wear to sleep, and they don't fall out even if you're a side sleeper. And with the biometrics, can actually read when you've fallen asleep and can either turn off
Oh, I've heard
or
about these.
transition to sound
Yes.
waves that keep you asleep. So
Brilliant.
finding, brands and products that are, related to what we're
Yeah.
doing,
And well
just it's the perfect
aligned.
marriage. And
Yeah.
so we're finding a lot
Well, I found what was
neat things
interesting. I
there.
mean, when I met the folks who own the company and run the company, and some of your executives, was at the licensing show. And I found that just so interesting that they understood where they needed to be to expand the sort of breadth and awareness of what's possible. Like, not a brand you would have necessarily have thought would understood to be there, right?
Totally agree. And when I joined, that was one of my biggest fears, that when I went to Licensing Expo, which was about 3 weeks after I joined the company, I just feared that people would be like, "Oh, they're just yoga mats and yoga pants and candles, and that's it. That's all that they're going to be good for." But I was pleasantly surprised that brands got it. They
Yeah.
saw the potential and saw what we could do together. So it's just, right out of the gate, the support that was out there for other brands was huge. And beyond just typical licensing, the great thing about our brand is that we've sort of earned the ability to potentially bring our own products to market. And so we're exploring categories where we can, sort of skip the whole licensee side of it and actually bring product to
Real
market
development,
that we
yeah,
can,
which makes
develop
sense. I mean,
ourselves.
look, the wellness lifestyle category is massive. I've been consulting and working with some brands in that space and conferences and events and things. And so I think you're right that when you start to understand the lifestyle category that it actually is and the impact of it, it's fascinating. And I'm excited for you because you get to really play in a lot of ways, draw on a lot of your experience, bring all of that to the table. Lucky them to have you. I think that's really
Oh, thank you.
exciting. And to be doing something that you can be proud of. I mean, literally,
Yes.
I have the app on my phone, of course. And funnily, at some point today, something popped up. I have the notifications on because even just seeing the pop up of the brand reminds me so subliminally to just like take a breath
Totally.
no
Yep.
matter what I'm doing in the chaos of my day. And I find that the beautiful irony pretty fabulous because I didn't have to like go do a, 20-minute meditation. I just sort of saw the app and it was like someone tapping me on the shoulder going, take, be calm, carry on.
Well, I'll tell you a funny story. I was at BLE, in October,
And that, for
and
those who don't
traveled
know,
to.
is British Licensing Expo.
Yes,
Yes.
so I was there, and had just flown in the day before. Dodgers were in the World Series. There was a game on, and being a huge Dodger fan, I was listening to it, on the radio, and decided to not, go to sleep at a reasonable hour. I now found myself at like 3 in the morning, unable to sleep, and thought to myself, "I wish there was an app that could help me just fall asleep."
Stop.
And obviously I was, jet lagged. I'm like, what am I thinking? I work for Calm, and I put it on, and I was asleep in like 5 minutes. So
That is
it really,
hysterical.
really works.
It does.
I can
I
tell
can
you, it
vouch
really
for it
works.
as well. I love that. Well, I travel a lot, and sometimes you're in rooms where there are other people or you're on different time zones, your body clock's
Totally.
all upside down, no question. Joe, we could talk forever. There's so many more things I want to ask and talk about and chat about, but I unfortunately we're almost at time. Do you feel like you are living your true north right now for you?
Yes and no. I mean, yes, I'm very fulfilled in the work that I'm doing, but I think the writing and the film stuff, it still remains
Yeah,
my true passion, and it's become more of a hobby over the years. And I do see in the future for me that becoming the full time
yeah,
piece. I
great.
do feel like that's my next step, regardless of where things go. I do think that for me, my last chapter of my life will be all based in that and my ability to focus 100% on writing and producing and maybe directing again. But I think that's definitely where my next chapter is headed. Whenever I get there.
And I think that's so wonderful that, that like I see the twinkle in your eye when you even talk about it. And the fact that you know where your passion lies or your interest lies, and to be able to do what you're doing. And look, it sounds like you've spent a big part of your life multitasking, doing a lot. I mean, look, I run an agency. I do 80 things at all times,
Yeah,
and it's the only way I know. So that expression of a jack of all trades, master of none, there's actually more to that expression. I need to look it up because I've heard it. And it actually ends in a way that makes it sound like we're on the right track doing multiple things. So someone has taken part of that phrase and turned it into something negative. It actually is a really good thing, and I'm sticking to it.
I like it.
But for me, I find that doing a lot of things and checking a lot of those boxes and fulfilling a lot of parts, we are very complex individuals, each and every one of us. Spiritual, relationships, hobbies, passions, health, fitness, relationships, careers, jobs. Careers and jobs can be very different things. I mean, why not have it all? Right.
Totally
And,
agree.
one of the things I talk about incessantly is we are entitled. And if we know we're entitled to have what we want in our lives, we can then set out on the journey to create and bring those things into our life. So
Couldn't agree more.
I feel like you got the memo. You get it.
Yep.
And I'm excited for you. And I love this conversation. And I'm
This
so
has been
excited
a lot
to
of fun.
just,
Thank you.
yeah, we will forever keep the conversation going, you and I.
Absolutely.
And I just really thank you. Really great to connect. Great to hear your stories. Thank you for all your pearls of wisdom and inspiration that you've shared.
Thanks for having me. This has
And
been a lot of fun.
keep calm and carry on, as they say.
Yes, indeed.
Thanks, Joe.
Thanks, Kathy.
Thank you, everybody, for joining us. I loved this conversation today. And for those who want a little more information, feel free to go to the Reinvention Exchange. You can hear previous episodes. You can read blogs. You can listen to other stories, anecdotes, and just learn lots more about how to live your ultimate life. So happy reinventing, everybody. Thanks for listening to The Power of Reinvention. If you enjoyed this episode, please head over to iTunes to subscribe, rate, and review the show. Wouldn't mind a 5-star review. It would be greatly appreciated. Also, be sure to visit thereinventionexchange.com to share your reinvention stories, suggest a guest, join the newsletter mailing list, get access to my book, which is called Reinvent Your Life, What Are You Waiting For?, and discover fantastic bonus content with my blogs, and listen in to the Reinvention Virtual Chat series. Don't forget to join me next week for another episode. Please share with a friend, and thank you for listening. Happy reinventing.